The third replay made Frank's hands shake. He sat in the darkness above his coffee shop, laptop screen casting blue shadows across his weathered face as the video loaded again. Hero or vigilante? Cafe owner's brutal takedown goes viral. The comments section scrolled past like a fever dream. Millions of strangers dissecting 18 seconds that had taken him 15 years to forget. Dude moves like special forces. That's not some random shopkeeper. Someone's been trained to kill. Frank slammed the laptop shut. Outside, Moss-side slept fitfully under sodium streetlights, the same restless sleep that had claimed this corner of Manchester for decades. Sirens wailed in the distance, the neighborhood's lullaby. He'd grown comfortable with the rhythm of it, the predictable chaos that had hidden him since 2009. His fingers found Sarah's ring through his shirt, the gold warm against his chest. She would have told him to run, pack the emergency bag, use the clean passport, disappear into whatever hole Henderson had prepared for situations like this. Sarah had always been the smart one, but Sarah wasn't here anymore. The old woman, Mrs. Chen, had thanked him in broken English before the ambulance arrived, bowed so low her gray hair nearly touched the pavement. Those kids had been working her over for her pension money, probably the same crew that had been pushing their luck in the neighborhood for months. Frank had watched it building, tension coiling like a spring, telling himself it wasn't his problem. Then the biggest one had shoved her into the brick wall. Muscle memory was a cruel thing. 15 years of brewing coffee and small talk had dissolved in 18 seconds of pure violence. The army had trained him. Montenegro had refined him. The Volkov contract had perfected him into something that killed without thinking, moved without hesitation. Frank walked to his kitchenette and opened the freezer. Behind a wall of frozen meals sat a metal box he hadn't touched in 3 years. Inside, 30,000 pounds in cash, a Glock 19, 2 magazines, and a passport that said his name was David Mills. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number saw the news. Beautiful work. Some skills never fade, do they, Francis? Only one person had ever called him Francis. Only one person who should have been in Belmarsh prison for another 8 years. Another text, Mrs. Chen sends her regards. Amazing coincidence, running into her like that. Small world. Frank's blood turned to ice water. He moved to the window overlooking the street where it had happened. The pavement still showed dark stains where the biggest kid had bled from his broken nose. Mrs. Chen's groceries had scattered everywhere, rice and vegetables mixing with broken glass from her shopping bag. An old woman alone with her pension money, perfect target for street thugs. Except Mrs. Chen had looked right at him before the attack started. Made eye contact through the coffee shop window like she was checking if he was watching. And when the kids approached her, she hadn't run toward the main street where there might be help. She'd moved closer to his shop. You stupid bastard, Frank thought. They played you like a violin. His laptop chimed. New message on the encrypted email account he hadn't checked in 5 years. The sender made his stomach drop. Volk 2024. Francis, 15 years is a long time. I've grown up since you killed my father and destroyed my family. Learned patience, learned planning. The Chen woman was just the beginning. Let's see how much of the old Francis is left. Tomorrow, Piccadilly Gardens, noon. Come alone or I start working through your neighbors. I have such plans for the girl in 2B, Emily Morrison, 23 years old, nursing student at Manchester Metropolitan. She'd brought him soup when he had the flu last winter, never asked why a man his age lived alone above a coffee shop in Moss-side. Frank closed his eyes and saw Sarah's face the morning she died. The way she'd hummed while making breakfast, unaware that Dimitri's father had already sent the cleanup crew. She'd been collateral damage then, leverage to ensure Frank's cooperation. History was repeating itself, 15 years later. Different city, different players, same rules. He opened the laptop again. The video had 6 million views now, comments in a dozen languages, shares climbing by the thousands. His face, older, grayer, but unmistakably his, broadcast to the world. No amount of running would erase this. Frank pulled on his jacket and checked the Glock's action. 15 years of brewing coffee had ended the moment he decided to be a hero. Now he had to remember how to be something else, something Sarah would never forgive him for becoming again. Tomorrow's episode reveals the connection between Mrs. Chen and the detective who saved Frank's life. And you won't believe how deep this conspiracy goes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the next 24 hours will change everything you think you know about Frank Kellerman. The weight of the Glock felt like coming home to a house you'd burned down. Frank sat on the edge of his narrow bed, the pistol heavy in his weathered hands as Manchester's pre-dawn silence pressed against his windows. Sarah's wedding ring caught the streetlight, casting a thin gold line across the weapon's matte black finish. He'd held both these things before, in another life, in another man's hands. The coffee shop below him held 15 years of careful construction, a life built one interaction at a time, one perfectly ordinary day after another. Mrs. Patel from the corner market stopped by every Tuesday for her usual, extra shot, no sugar. Always paid exact change from a little purple coin purse. Young Marcus from the youth center came in after school, pretending to read but really just wanting somewhere warm to sit. Frank never charged him for the second cup. These people had become his anchors without his permission. Their routines had wrapped around his isolation like ivy, giving shape to something that had felt dead for so long. He'd convinced himself it was camouflage, that the kindness was just another layer of his cover identity. But watching Marcus struggle with his homework at table 3, seeing Mrs. Patel's face light up when he remembered her daughter's wedding anniversary. Somewhere along the way, Frank Kellerman, the coffee shop owner, had stopped being an act. Now David Mills sat holding a gun again, and Frank Kellerman was dissolving like sugar in bitter water. The floorboards above him creaked. Emily's morning routine starting early. She worked the early shift at Manchester Royal Infirmary, always left by 5:30. Frank had memorized the sounds without meaning to. Alarm at 4:45, shower at 4:50, kettle clicking off at 5:15. In the winter months, he'd started his own morning routine 15 minutes earlier, just to have the shop's heating system warmed up when she passed by the windows. Such a small kindness, such a dangerous attachment. His phone buzzed against the nightstand. Another message from DVOLC 2024, "Sleep well, Francis? The girl's shift starts at 6. Trauma ward. So many sharp objects in a hospital." Frank closed his eyes and felt the weight of every choice that had led here. The morning Sarah died, she'd asked him to pick up milk on the way home. Such ordinary words. He'd kissed her forehead and promised he'd be back by lunch. Instead, he'd spent the day in a police station, spilling 15 years of secrets to Detective Inspector Janet Chen, while Sarah bled out in their kitchen, alone. Chen. The name hit him like ice water. Mrs. Chen's grateful bow yesterday, the way she'd pressed his hand with both of hers while thanking him. Had her accent been quite so thick 15 years ago when she'd been wearing a police uniform instead of a flower print dress, when she'd been Detective Inspector Janet Chen, the woman who'd saved his life by believing his testimony about the Volkov family's reach into Manchester's police force? Frank moved to his kitchen and put the kettle on, hands working through familiar motions while his mind reeled. The conspiracy wasn't just about drawing him out, it was personal. Dmitri had found the one person whose life Frank owed, transformed her into bait, then orchestrated a situation where Frank's protective instincts would override 15 years of survival training. The kettle's whistle cut through the silence like a scream. Frank poured hot water over instant coffee, black, no sugar. The routine felt sacred somehow, one last normal act before the world came apart again. He'd drunk this same terrible coffee every morning for 15 years, telling himself he preferred it to the expensive blends he sold downstairs. Really, it was just another form of penance, another way to remember that Frank Kellerman deserved nothing better than bitter solitude. Through the thin walls, he could hear Emily moving around her flat, soft footsteps, cabinet doors closing carefully so she wouldn't wake her neighbors. She was studying to be a pediatric nurse, had told him once that she wanted to work with children because they still believed grown-ups could fix anything. The irony burned like acid in his throat. Outside, the first bus of the day rumbled down Princess Road, carrying night shift workers home and day shift workers toward another ordinary morning. In 6 hours, Marcus would walk past on his way to school, probably stop in for hot chocolate before first period. Mrs. Patel would follow her Tuesday routine, purple coin purse and extra shot, no sugar. The world would keep turning as if Frank Kellerman had ever been real, as if the man who'd killed 12 people in 18 months had ever deserved their casual trust. Frank finished his coffee and set the empty mug in the sink. 15 years of washing dishes, sweeping floors, and pretending to care about milk foam had led to this moment. Tomorrow at noon, he'd walk into Piccadilly Gardens and face the son of the man he'd helped destroy. But first, he had one more morning as Frank Kellerman. He checked his watch, 5:20. Emily would be leaving soon. Time to make sure the shop's windows were clean, that she'd have something pleasant to see when she walked past. Some habits were worth keeping, even at the end of the world. Frank descended the narrow stairs to his coffee shop, keys jingling softly in the pre-dawn quiet. The familiar ritual of unlocking doors and switching on lights felt different now, heavier, like performing last rites. He pulled cleaning supplies from beneath the counter and began wiping down the front windows, removing yesterday's fingerprints and the faint outline where Mrs. Chen had pressed her palm against the glass. Detective Inspector Janet Chen. Retired now, obviously, but 15 years ago she'd been the one clean cop in Manchester willing to believe that half her colleagues were on Volkov's payroll. The one person who'd looked at Frank's battered face in that interview room and seen truth instead of opportunity. The window squeaked under his cloth. Outside, Princess Road lay empty except for a fox picking through overturned bins near the bus stop. Frank had always found comfort in these early morning hours, the brief suspension of chaos that came before the neighborhood woke up. Now every shadow felt like a threat. His phone buzzed. Another message. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Perfect day to visit old friends. Frank's hand tightened on the spray bottle until his knuckles went white. The phone buzzed again immediately, and his blood froze when he saw the attachment, a photograph taken from across the street, showing him standing in his own window. The timestamp read 5:23 a.m. They were here, watching. A third message arrived before he could process the second. Mrs. Chen asked me to give you something. A token of appreciation for yesterday's heroics. Check your back door. Frank set down the cleaning supplies with deliberate calm. His mind catalogued possibilities as he moved toward the rear of the shop. Explosive device, severed body part, poison gas canister. The Volkovs had always favored psychological warfare before the killing started. They'd sent Sarah's wedding dress to him piece by piece during the original investigation, each fragment delivered with a love note written in her blood. The back door stood slightly ajar. Frank was certain he'd locked it last night. Certain. He approached with the careful steps his military training had drilled into him, weight on the balls of his feet, ready to move in any direction. The Glock pressed against his spine where he'd tucked it into his waistband, a cold reminder that he was no longer Frank Kellerman, coffee shop owner. He was Francis Mills again, and Francis Mills had been very good at killing people. The door swung open at his touch, revealing the narrow alley behind his building. Overflowing dumpsters, broken glass catching streetlight, the perpetual smell of piss and decay that defined Moss Side's forgotten corners. But there, sitting neatly on his doorstep like a birthday present, was a small wooden box tied with red ribbon. Frank knew that ribbon. Silk, expensive, the exact shade Volkov Sr. had used to wrap the pieces of Sarah's dress. Some traditions died hard. He lifted the box carefully, checking for tripwires or pressure plates. It felt too light for explosives, too heavy for photographs. The ribbon came away easily, and the lid opened with a soft click that seemed to echo off the alley walls. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a police badge. Tarnished silver with Manchester Metropolitan Police etched around the crown insignia, and beneath it, a handwritten note on cream-colored paper. Francis, Detective Inspector Chen wanted you to have this. A reminder of the day she chose to believe a killer's word over her own colleagues. Did you know she lost her pension, her reputation, her marriage, all because she decided to trust you? Amazing what 15 years can do to a person. See you at noon. D. Frank's hands began to shake. The badge was real. He could see the scratches and wear marks that came from years of honest service. Janet Chen had given up everything to help him bring down the Volkov family. And what had it cost her? What had happened to the woman who'd sat across from him in that interview room, promising that justice would be worth the price they'd both pay? The answer lay in yesterday's performance. The bent old woman shuffling down Princess Road with her shopping bag, vulnerable and alone. Janet Chen hadn't just aged, she'd been broken, reduced to bait in her own son-in-law's game, because that's what this had to be. Dmitri hadn't just found Janet Chen by accident. He'd married into her family, gotten close, learned about the man she'd helped disappear 15 years ago. Frank closed the box and stepped back into his coffee shop, locking the door behind him. But locks wouldn't help now. The past had finally caught up, wearing the face of a woman who'd sacrificed everything for justice and received only suffering in return. Upstairs, Emily's footsteps moved across the floor, getting ready for another day of saving lives, believing the world could be fixed with enough care and patience. In 6 hours, Marcus would want his hot chocolate. Mrs. Patel would count out exact change from her purple coin purse. Frank Kellerman's world was ending, but their world would continue. He had to make sure of that, even if it meant Francis Mills had to kill again. The espresso machine's familiar hiss filled the silence as Frank went through the motions of opening his shop, grinding beans, filling water reservoirs, arranging pastries behind glass, each task performed with mechanical precision while his mind raced. The wooden box sat on the counter behind him like a loaded weapon, Janet Chen's badge catching the fluorescent light. Keep to the routine. Act normal. Give them nothing. But his hands trembled as he counted the till, and twice he dropped coins that scattered across the floor like accusations. 15 years of careful normalcy, and his cover was disintegrating with every passing minute. At exactly 5:32, Emily's footsteps echoed down the stairwell outside. Frank positioned himself at the window, cloth in hand, as she appeared on Princess Road. Dark ponytail, navy scrubs, the same canvas messenger bag she'd carried since nursing school. She glanced toward the shop, force of habit, and raised her hand in a small wave. Frank lifted his own hand to respond, then froze. Across the street, partially hidden behind a parked van, a figure in a dark jacket lowered something that glinted like a camera lens. Or a scope. Emily walked on, oblivious, her footsteps fading toward the main road. The figure melted back into the shadows between buildings. Frank's phone buzzed. Pretty girl. Shame if something happened to her because you made poor choices. His finger hovered over the reply button. Part of him, the part that had once been Francis Mills, wanted to respond with precise threats, to make it clear what would happen to anyone who touched her. But Frank Kellerman would be confused, frightened. Frank Kellerman would call the police. Who is this? What do you want? The response came immediately. You know what I want, Francis. Noon. Piccadilly Gardens. Don't disappoint me. Frank set the phone aside and returned to his opening routine, but everything felt wrong. The familiar weight of coffee cans in his hands, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as he arranged the seating area, it all belonged to someone else now, someone who'd never existed except as camouflage. At 7:15, Mrs. Patel arrived for her Tuesday ritual. Frank watched through the window as she approached, counting coins from her purple purse before she even reached the door. Everything about her was exactly the same. Flower print headscarf, careful steps avoiding the broken pavement, the shy smile she always wore when practicing her English. Good morning, Mrs. Patel. Extra shot. No sugar? Yes, please, Frank. Her accent made his name sound musical. You are looking tired today. Not sleeping well? Such a simple question, such impossible kindness. Frank busied himself with the espresso machine, steam hissing to cover the silence. In the reflection of the metal surface, he could see Mrs. Patel waiting patiently, hands folded, trusting that her Tuesday would unfold exactly like every other Tuesday. Just a busy morning, he managed. She counted out exact change, £2, 50 pence, and placed each coin carefully on the counter. My daughter says I should use the cards, but I like the old way. More personal, yes? More personal, Frank agreed, handing her the paper cup. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he was struck by how small her hands were, how easily they could be broken. After she left, Frank locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. His customers would assume he was sick, maybe make sympathetic comments about him working too hard. By tonight, they'd probably never think about Frank Kellerman again. He climbed the stairs to his flat and sat on the edge of his bed, Sarah's ring warm against his chest. The Glock lay beside him, cleaned and loaded, as familiar as an old lover. Francis Mills had carried a dozen different weapons over the years, but the Glock had been with him the night he'd killed Volkov Sr. The night everything had started, his laptop chimed. New email from an address he didn't recognize. Tenderson 2024. Frank's blood went cold. Detective Chief Inspector David Henderson, the handler who'd arranged his new identity, the man who'd sworn the Volkov family would never find him, the man who'd vanished from Frank's life the day his protection officially ended. Francis, heard you've been making the news. Bad business, showing your face like that. Dimitri's been planning this for years, waiting for you to surface. The Chen woman isn't random. She's his mother-in-law. Married her daughter in 2019, been feeding him information ever since. You're walking into a trap. Get out now. The emergency protocols are still active. DH. Frank stared at the screen until the words blurred. Mother-in-law. Dimitri hadn't just used Janet Chen as bait. He'd married into her family, spent years earning her trust, learning about the case that had destroyed his father. The patient, methodical cruelty of it was breathtaking. A new message appeared. P.S. Emily Morrison isn't random either. Check her employment records. Nothing is coincidence with the Volkovs. Frank's hands shook as he typed Emily's name into the laptop's search function. Everything was connected. Everyone was compromised. And he was already too late to run.